What's up, friends, and welcome in to Fantasy Pros. It is Week 5 ranks. I am joined by Pat Fitzmaurice. We've got Scott Pianowski. I am Chris Welsh. We are hitting all the important ranks for you in Week 5 because bye weeks have begun and things are ready to get crazy. That's right. And we're going to get a little bit of crazy here as we've got Scott and we've got Pat's ranks battling up against each other in the ultimate duo of those rank battles. Pat, are you ready to get down to business?
I'm ready. I mean, you always feel a little dirty when the bye weeks kick in and you're starting people who you had ranked as, wide receiver 5s going into the season. But hey, that's the fun of fantasy football.
Yeah, Scott, we're going to totally have, the normal awesome names at RB inside the top 12. We're going to really feel comfortable this week with all our running backs. It's not like those bye weeks are taking, amazing guys away from us, right?
I love bye week season. It's a time to check your standings, do an audit of your league, see where you're at. Do you have the leverage to wait on some of these, a Jonathan Brooks or a Christian McCaffrey? If you're 4-0 or 3-1, maybe you do. If you're 1-3 or 0-4, maybe you have to get going and start into win now mode. Here's the thing. When people draft their leagues in the summer, hopefully on Yahoo, everybody loves their team. Everybody's going to the playoffs. Everybody's got a championship dream. Now it's like a poker game where some people are up money now, some people are down money now. The objective shift. I feel like trading season begins when bye week season begins because now people feel a little bit of that emotional ping. There's some separation in the standings. You may need some of those Eagles who aren't playing in week 5, some of those Lions who aren't playing in week 5. So I think the game becomes more dynamic now. And that means if you're a skilled fantasy player, I actually think it plays to your advantage.
Yeah, everybody has a better idea of where you stand on, what your team construction looks like based on your record. Maybe you have 4-0 and 3-1. Maybe there's a little bit more desperation. Bye weeks, as you guys have said, going to create some interesting trade scenarios where you could maybe get a little bit of a extra boost on a player that's on a bye week or an extra discount, if you will, in making those trades. And we got PUP designations that are going to be changing all of this. So it's all fun. We are going to get to it. Jumping into running back ranks today is what we'll be doing right here. But first, a little bit of business. We've been telling you guys about the Devontae Smith autograph helmet. Well, guess what? It's going home. We're ready to announce the winner of the Devontae Smith Eagles autograph helmet. And Dylan Jones, you're taking Devontae Smith home. We'll be contacting you to get you that prize, so make sure you're on the lookout, my friend. And congratulations again on Dylan Jones winning the Devontae Smith helmet. But friends, we're not done. Nope. It's time for more. So if you, listening, want a chance to win a signed Justin Jefferson Vikings helmet for free, courtesy of our friends over at pristineauction.com, all you've got to do is head to fantasypros.com/contest. You can complete the form and either download the Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard app, leave a review for a podcast, follow us on X, Instagram, or TikTok at Fantasy Pros, because guess what? All of those things are going to get you more entries so you can win. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the podcast, just like we did with Dylan Jones. So if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you are subscribed and you turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. Fellas, we're going to get into these ranks, but we do want to give a shout out to the top 3 in the Fantasy Pros rank accuracy contest for week 4. Unfortunately, it is not us 3. We can go and see where Pat and Scott, and definitely not me, are going to be ranking. But hat tip to Mr. Zach Brunner, who finished number 1 in week 4's accuracy ranks. Bill Enright, number 2, and Eli Tversky, number 3. Zach Brunner, Bill Enright, Eli Tversky, congratulations to you 3, all killing the contest in week 4. Make sure if you guys want, obviously listening, you're not going to be a part of the ranks contest. I mean, maybe you are, but if you're not a part of the ranks contest, you can at least get a part of the ranks, fantasypros.com/rankings. You can check out all the rankings as they adjust every single day for all the crazy moves, so you know the latest and greatest. After we do this episode, some things might end up changing. Speaking of the episode, let's get into it, fellas. It's running back time. We will go through the top 12 first. Jordan Mason is the number 1 running back currently for week 5. Derrick Henry at 2, Kyren Williams at 3. We've got Alvin Kamara, Ken Walker. That rounds out your top 5. Bijan, Breece Hall, Aaron Jones, James Cook, Josh Jacobs, James Conner, and Brian Robinson. Actually, kind of be fair, it's not as bad with the bye weeks as you thought, knowing like the Lions guys are out of there. That's still a relatively chalky group, nothing crazy insane. But since we don't spend a lot of time at home on the top 12 and these like no-brainers, let's talk about this one though. His ECR, it actually ended up moving down to 12. But I want to talk about him here. Or he was 12. He's now 14. This happened like in a day's span. But this has been a chalk, no doubt, top 12 running back. Let's talk about Achane. Achane, Fitz, you've got at 14. Scott, you've got him down at 16. The offense has everybody worried. He actually took to Twitter, by the way, and said, fantasy owners, don't worry, we're going to get this right. So he was trying to let everybody know you can keep going. But Scott, let's start with you. Where is the pessimism of Achane maybe outside of the quarterback play, or is it simply with how Tyler Huntley was moving this offense and how ineffective the Dolphins were?
Yeah, it's just when you don't have a quarterback you can trust, the infrastructure of the offense just goes in the toilet. And yeah, it's just funny how we've had those doubleheaders on Monday night, and both times has been a game you didn't want to watch and a game you wanted to watch. And the game nobody wanted to watch was Miami, Tennessee. Although if you tuned in late, you got your Tony Pollard touchdown in garbage time. So, significant to some, as Scott Van Pelt would say. But the only bright spot for the Vikings, for the Dolphins that I'll give you is that bye week next week. And because they haven't made a major quarterback move, and look, there's not a quarterback tree they can pluck from. It's not like when your quarterbacks get hurt, there are easy fixes outside of a organization. But because they haven't done anything major, I'm hoping that means that Tua is maybe coming back at some point in October, and then we can plug in this offense again. But right now, this is an unplugged offense, and you can't play Achane with any confidence. I think Achane and Tyreek Hill are probably must starts just because they can make your week on one play. You can't go near anybody else in this offense, and it's no fun because when they're all healthy, it's a top 5 fantasy offense. Right now, it's basically on the restricted list. I don't have any Achane shares, and I've run the roller coaster. For 2 weeks, that was hellish. For the last 2 weeks, it's been okay. Nobody takes satisfaction in an injury, but I'm hoping the fact that they haven't done anything major, Snoop Huntley doesn't qualify as anything major, obviously, that means they are cautiously optimistic we'll see Tua again this month.
So Fitz, within a day's span, Achane was 12, and then that moved all the way to 14, which is where you've got Achane at. And it's a really difficult situation too, because one of the worst parts about it was like Raheem Mostert has not been around. And now it's like, okay, Achane can just go and he can feed. And the offense has just been abysmal the last 2 weeks with this quarterback play. So I know Erickson and I have been kind of proponents of, maybe buying really low on like a Tyreek Hill, me specifically on that one. Achane has also kind of fallen into that. But we are in a really weird spot right now where, I gave a lot of the Dolphins the benefit of the doubt of like, oh, Mike McDaniel's an offensive genius. They're going to do it. Looked awful. Like every game plan, you're just like, every decision was bad. No, we should run when you're throwing. You should get more screen passes out. They threw to HM 3 times in the first half. Did not look to him again in the passing game, and he plays out of the slot so well. How much should we be concerned about starting him this week at 14? And do you think there is a future forecast of wanting to even, I know it's not a trade show, but of kind of buy back into him that maybe, we could have a good week coming in the future?
So maybe the silver lining here is that I do think Achane has become pretty clearly the lead back there. I'm not worried about the return of Raheem Mostert fundamentally changing the role of Achane. I think it's just who is number 2 now? Like, are they going to give an extended look to Jalen Wright and maybe diminish the Mostert role, or is it just Mostert back as the clear number 2? And I do understand people not wanting to, or at least being reluctant to play Achane this week after the bad stat line we got on Monday night. 10 carries for 15 yards, 3 catches for 14 yards. But the fact that like Scott is more reluctant than I am on Achane, and he still has him at running back 16, and in a bye week, you're probably starting your running back 16. So terrific player, but what good is a great engine when your car is blown a tire? I guess that's the thing. And are we going to see maybe a better week from Tyler Huntley now that he's had a few weeks to digest the playbook? I don't think it's going to be an explosive offense, but maybe it can at least be a functional one against the Patriots this week. I still find him more appealing than some of the other RB2 types this week, like Travis Etienne also playing in a dysfunctional offense. Najee Harris a plotter. Zach Moss, a bunch of the other RB2 types. I would still rather go with the big play potential of Devon Achane, but yes, there's certainly concerns with the Miami offense just being so sickly these days.
And that's really telling where you just brought the group in, because you just brought a group in of guys that all have these big major questions. And to think that we're like, yeah, Achane over Zach Moss, that with those guys even being kind of a conversation of being comfortable with it really does tell you where it is. And it's really about this offense. That's, I think, the hardest analysis of the Dolphins situation is like, Tyreek Hill is a massively talented player. Devon Achane is a massively talented player, but there is no moving this offense. Huntley did not make many good passes. They could not move, and they could not move the sticks and get first downs. And that's going to hold a guy like Achane back. And bye weeks, if it wasn't here, Achane might be in the 20s. And that would start to signify a player that maybe you could sit if you had really good options, but not everybody is gifted with all of these great RB options. Can I ask you guys one quick thing on this off topic or off sheet is when you look at that top 12, if you had to pick one player, and Pat, we'll start with you. If you had to pick one player that you think is going to have a massive difference from where they are ranked this week down. So maybe I'm kind of saying like, the biggest failure, or the biggest adjustment, maybe Aaron Jones struggling against the Jets and not finishing as like a top 15 RB. Is there one person, not saying you have to, lower this and they're even lowering your ranks, but you're worried about from this week that's in that top 12?
One person I'm worried about for this week. Man, I am a little bit worried about Bijan. Just seeing the usage and we thought the Arthur Smith removal was going to make for this fantastic usage for Bijan. And we still saw Tyler Algier getting a lot of work last week. And it just seems like the Falcons are more comfortable running Algier between the tackles than they are with Bijan. And Bijan is limited to these like outside zone running plays and passing game usage. So, I mean, it's pretty interesting that we're hitting our first bye week of the season and Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall are only ranked as mid-range RB1s. I don't think anyone could have seen that coming.
I was going to, Mick and Keith and Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall, right? It's the same story. It's like, wait a minute, I thought this was wheels up, bell cow, let's go. The team was a wreck last year, but there's reasons why they're going to be great this year. They don't know who their goal line back is in New York. And this is like a closer situation in baseball where whoever gets the next conversion might have the baton. It's really easy for me to tell myself a story that the most rushing touchdowns on the Jets this year might belong to Braelon Allen. He might be their best player right now. And remember with the Jets, they're just not just scuffling on offense. They just lost to the Broncos. Teams make changes when they lose. It sounds stupid, but a lot of times if they had won that game, they might think, okay, we survived it. It was ugly. It was rainy. We didn't do anything on offense. They didn't do anything on offense. We got to win. But when you lose games, you feel heat and you feel the need to make changes. I wanted a lot of Breece Hall. I did not have a draft slot that was conducive to a lot of Breece Hall. And right now I am very thankful for that. And this Brian Flores defense gets after it against the run. It's a game in Europe, for crying out loud. So it's totally out of football's a game of routine, but there's no regular routine when you leave the country. Breece Hall managers right now are hoping for a big game for one of two things. Either they can sleep at night and just keep playing him every week, or if you want to get out of the Breece Hall business, you need something you can take to market. I'd be petrified when they get to the goal line and maybe Braelon Allen comes in and punches in the touchdown. Interesting, too. It might signify some buy opportunities if you are into those guys that they've ranked lower. I was kind of wondering if anyone would go with Josh Jacobs here. I believe it might have been the only back in this top 12 that had single-digit carries last week, Emmanuel Wilson coming up. But that's also me a little bit on the sell train of him. That's your top 12. Let's jump over 13 to 24, your RB2s for the week. Chuba Hubbard kicks us off at 13, going up against Chicago. Devon Achane, as we mentioned. Travis Etienne, Joe Mixon, Najee Harris, Rhamondre Stevenson at 18. Hello, DeAndre Swift. He's back inside the top 20 at 19. Jerome Ford, Devin Singletary. Oh, what is this? 2018. Kareem Hunt is in here at 22. Zach Moss and Rachaad White. Let's actually kick it off with Kareem Hunt here. RB 22. So he is in the startable range. We're getting him going. Fitz, you've got him at 24. Pianowski, you've got him at 19. So neither one of you maybe absolutely love or hate. But Scott, you are a bit higher at 19, a top 20 back for Kareem Hunt. And I don't blame you because Carson Steele, poof, magic, gone last week. Fumble,
Don't ever give him a carry again. P. Ryan maintained his role, and Kareem Hunt took over. And now, obviously, with Rashee Rice out, there's, for whatever extended period of time, more reason for them to maybe get the ball on the ground. Top 20 RB for you, Scott, this week. Kareem Hunt, second active week with the Chiefs.
Man, do the Chiefs love bringing back their old players, right? I mean, they brought back Hunt, they brought back Juju, and I think we all kind of chuckled when moves like that get made, but they may need to play with the injuries they've had. And we saw Steele have the fumble last week. He did get one touch after that. I think it was shortly after that, but Hunt looked pretty good, better than I expected. My expectations could not have been lower when they added him, but now I think you have to play to the Chiefs are a team that wants to win with defense, that wants to win with 20 to 24 points. They have a wide receiver room we don't trust. Travis Kelce will probably have to get used more than we expected. We all know Patrick Mahomes has been in a slump for about a year. And I'm getting these responses on Twitter when I talk about that. Yeah, but he just wants to win. Okay. As opposed to all the other quarterbacks who are soullessly padding their stats and don't care if they win or not. Tell me who those guys are. Okay. And I'll adjust accordingly. But we have to play to the current reality. I don't think Kareem Hunt has a lot of explosion. I don't think this is the offense that it usually is. It wasn't last year, but it's like, oh, okay, any running back getting double-digit touches for the Chiefs, how bad could he be? So that's why Kareem Hunt is merely, I think he squeezes into my top 20. But we know right now, I think, barring an injury or some major mishap in the first quarter, Kareem Hunt's going to have double-digit touches. That's a currency. So much of the running back board is solving for the usage. And last week, they told you don't go by what teams say. You go by what they tell you on game day. And they told you that Kareem Hunt is the running back that we trust.
And it's kind of surprising, Pat. Like, you got him at 24. I think you have a little bit on the cautious side where you're like, hey, don't love him, but he just sits in there. Bye weeks, he probably would have been pushed down. Bogman and I talked about this a lot, that it's like 31 other teams had all those weeks to go and sign him. And then all of a sudden, the Chiefs pick him up. It's like, why were we going to fall over ourselves about Kareem Hunt when it seemed like he was done? And then sure enough, he comes in, he gets the double-digit carries. He seems to be the workforce guy. Probably also a pretty big add in waivers who didn't get him last week. Talk to us about Kareem Hunt for you. Like I said, you're a little bit lower than ECR, but you're still in range to have a solid take that, like, yeah, you got to get him out there, even though it's just such a short and small little stint that we saw. And to be frank, we saw Steele get 17. We saw Hunt, 16 or 17 this past week? Math either says, Hunt takes it, or now P. Ryan's going to get 17 and what they're doing. We don't really have a great gauge on the Chiefs, but this rank signifies we do have a gauge on Kareem Hunt.
So he did have a team high 14 carries last week, whereas Samaje Perine and Carson Steele combined for 7. But the committee, it was sort of a committee. We did see Hunt lead the team in snaps, but it was a plurality. He didn't even play 50% of the snaps. And now I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is eligible to come back this week. So this could maybe be a full-blown committee. That's, I guess, the reason I'm not ready to fully commit to Kareem Hunt as anything more than a low-end RB2. But at the same time, even if he is the chairman of the committee, like, that could be valuable. You do have to figure that without Rashee Rice, the Chiefs are going to have to direct more of the offense through the running backs.
Very interesting, Kareem Hunt getting in your starting lineups this week. Chuba Hubbard, maybe someone you didn't expect to be right around that top 12. But guess what? Andy Dalton has completely revived this offense. Chuba Hubbard going up against Chicago, though, which has been a pretty solid defense. He comes in at 13. Both of you fine gentlemen have him as an RB1 this week at 11. So, Pat, let's start with you. RB11 Chuba Hubbard against that Chicago defense.
Again, Andy Dalton's 2 starts for the Panthers. Chuba has had 2 100-yard rushing games, 39 carries and 9 catches in those 2 games, 290 yards from scrimmage, and those 2 touchdowns. The Bears, it's not an easy matchup, but right now I think they've allowed the 11th most fantasy points to running backs, so not necessarily a bad matchup either. And when a running back has a pretty good chance of getting 20 touches a game, you have to start him. And we have seen Chuba Hubbard average 24 touches a game with Andy Dalton at quarterback. He's a must start. I've got him at RB11, like low end running back 1.
And this is where things get weird too, because, I'll be like, hey, we got here our top 12 running backs. Let's not spend a lot of time on it because it's no brainers. But at this point in the season, no brainer doesn't necessarily exist anymore, because if I would have told you 4 weeks ago, hey, in week 5, you're going to no doubt start Chuba Hubbard over Devon Achane, you would have been like, what are you talking about, silly? Brooks is coming back. But that's where we're at. And that's where this situation is because, and Chuba Hubbard is one of those guys that, was drafted as like in the plus 30s of RBs that a lot of people could have. So Chuba Hubbard will be a guy that's going to probably push people against like, hey, I've got Najee Harris, I've got Travis Etienne, I've got Devon Achane, and Scott, like Pat was saying, you guys are going to vote and go for Chuba Hubbard this week.
I'm so glad you threw it to me because I was nervous I wouldn't get a chance to just say how much I love Chuba Hubbard. Yeah. One of my most drafted players. They have the no-show against the Saints, fine, but he was a decent RB26 and half-point PPR in week 2, even though they didn't play that much better. And since Andy Dalton's been under center, Pat gave you the backup football card stats. Like I'll give you the PPR ranks or half-point PPR. He's running back 5, running back 7 the last 2 weeks. The volume's there. The role in the passing game is there. The goal line equity is there. He actually had a chance at a second touchdown, didn't punch it in, but they like Chuba Hubbard. And I actually think, I don't know that a lot of people agree with me because I think a lot of people think, oh, as soon as Brooks comes in, he's just going to shove Chuba Hubbard out of the way. I think Hubbard's going to be fantasy viable all season. It maybe is more of a what the heck flex once Brooks comes back. We'll see how quickly Brooks is ready to play in the NFL. The Panthers probably know that they're not a contender this year, even with Dalton making the offense respectable. But I'm bullish on Hubbard. I think this week he's an easy start. I hope he doesn't percolate into my start sit questions because I would play him anywhere I can. If you're thinking about benching him, you must be loaded at running back royalty. Keep it to yourself, Albert Brooks might say. But I'm a Chuba Hubbard fan. And I think even when you watch him play, I mean, he understands how to run routes. He gets more than what's blocked. He's a physical runner. He can hit the second level and hit the occasional home run. I think he's just a good football player.
A pretend game, what would you do if Brooks was active? If this was the first week that Brooks was active, like where would you have Chuba, Scott?
I'm always prove it week with these guys off long layoffs, and sometimes it bites me. I want to see a prove it game from Jordan Love, and of course he proved it all right. It came late, but it did come. But I'm probably going to onboard Brooks slower than most people, and I'm probably going to cling to my priors on Hubbard longer than almost anybody in the industry.
So also just same thing, Pat, and anything else you want to add on lastly on this, but like if Brooks, this is a what if situation, was active right now, where do you think you would have put Chuba?
Maybe 2 spots lower. I'm of a similar mind as Scott on the Chuba Hubbard Jonathan Brooks situation. Like, what incentive do the Panthers have to give Brooks a heavy workload right away in a season where they know they're not playoff contenders and he's coming off a major knee injury? And Hubbard's been really good. Like, it's not just about the usage. He's actually looked very good so far. So anyone who's looking at Jonathan Brooks as this savior for their fantasy football team, I think is kind of kidding themselves. Like, he is not going to be a workhorse back at any point this season. I'd be shocked, like barring a major injury to Hubbard. Even then, I don't know how much they want to push it with the guy coming off his injury and in what's probably going to be a lost season for them.
One more back in this range to talk about. How about Rhamondre Stevenson? It's been a little bit up and down, really up early in the year. Obviously, the fumbles got some people concerned. Antonio Gibson's production has some people concerned. I think no one's like ready to, wave the white flag on Rhamondre Stevenson, but I think there are some like general concerns that are out there. Yet he shows up at 18. That's not a bad spot going up against Miami. What a great game that's going to be for like which disappointing running back can be even better. Rhamondre's had some nice points so far this season, but you guys are a little bit different. He's ECR 18. Scott, you've got him at 18, but Fitz, you've got him at 15. So you've got a little bit of optimism. So I actually just want to jump back to Fitz just to kick it off since you are optimistic on it. What's got you putting Rhamondre up multiple spots according or against ECR?
The likelihood of a favorable game script. And we saw favorable game scripts for the Patriots in the first 2 weeks of the season. They upset the Bengals in week 1. They lost to Seattle in overtime in week 2. And in those 2 games, Rhamondre had more than 20 carries. He had 25 for 120 and a touchdown in week 1, 21 for 81 and a touchdown in week 2. Then in weeks 3 and 4, the Patriots got their doors blown off by the Jets and the 49ers. Rhamondre 6 carries against the Jets, 13 against the Niners. I don't think the Patriots are going to get blown out by this Dolphins team that doesn't look like it can hang 20 points on anyone. Dolphins ranked 26th in DVOA against the run. They've allowed the 4th most fantasy points to running backs. Just a really nice setup for Rhamondre.
Scott, any takes on Rhamondre Stevenson? I felt like there was like an extra little added bit of worry going into this week with Rhamondre, just maybe overall. And I think it just has to do with Gibson a tiny bit. You've got him right at ECR, so you're not a hater or in massive love or anything, but any takes on Rhamondre?
Yeah, I thought Pat outlined the game script angle is important because this is a game New England can hide their quarterback like they normally want to, and Stevenson's usage should be good. Just a little bit of concern that Gibson's looked better than I expected. And Stevenson has put the ball on the ground 4 straight times. They didn't lose the fumbles in week 1 and 2. They recovered them, but they did lose the ball the last 2 weeks. Every coach hates fumbles. I guess maybe Jonathan Mayo doesn't hate them as much as some teams because they haven't mothballed Stevenson yet. And obviously they paid him, but I'm just a little concerned that Gibson looks spry and Stevenson has this ball security issue, but it's going to be the first team to 17 wins, right? It's going to be a low scoring game. It's going to be a game that ends early. It's going to be a game where both teams don't want to throw the ball downfield. So Stevenson should end this game with 15 to 20 touches, albeit in an offense where maybe they score 1 touchdown. He probably has the best chance to score that touchdown, but that all equals, I think, solid, if unsexy, running back 2 value this week.
Can I just comment on the irony of Antonio Gibson standing to gain from another running back losing fumbles? I mean, if Ron Rivera was coaching the Patriots right now, Gibson would probably be the lead back already.
Poor Antonio Gibson, or good Antonio Gibson. They're building a career off of recovering those fumbles. We got more running backs. We got the RB3/flexes coming up. But first, touchdown, TD, Tutty, taking it to the house, in for 6. Whatever you call a touchdown, one thing's for sure, touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, from the special teams or defense, we don't care how they score them. We want to bet on touchdowns. You can go and bet on our boy Chuba Hubbard, who we just talked about a little bit ago, on anytime touchdown plus 110. That's telling you the expectation. That is kind of a good day. How about 2 touchdowns on Chuba plus 750? You can get in on the action right now. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly, and you can get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, RBs 25 through 36. We are kicking off with Javonte Williams up at 25, Bucky Irving at 26, Chase Brown, Rico Dowdle, Roschon Johnson, Braelon Allen at 30, Trey Sermon at 31, Justice Hill, Zach Charbonnet, Tyler Algier, Tank Bigsby, and Zamir White. Fun fact, Zamir White in the 24-hour span jumped Alexander Madison. Madison was in that 36 spot. People really not 100% sure what to do, even though Pierce said that they want to use more Madison, and they'll continue using more Madison because they'll probably not have Devontae Adams because they're going to trade him because he's business. But we're not going to talk about those guys. Let's talk about Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams back up. Funny enough, there's quite a few running backs that after the first 2 weeks of the season was like, well, we were wrong about Dowdle. Well, we were wrong about Chase Brown. Well, we were wrong about Javonte Williams. And they're all back up into this range in this flexi area. And let's do this with Javonte Williams because this is our biggest discrepancy of ranks across the board. Javonte with that ECR of 25. Fitz, you've got him at 23. And Pianowski, 39. No Javonte Williams for you. I'm kind of in the never trust camp of Javonte Williams. So, Scott, let's talk about Javonte Williams.
Yeah, I probably haven't given him enough credit for a decent game against the Jets, but the team scored 10 points. He doesn't have a touchdown yet. He didn't even get to 3 yards a carry in his first 3 starts. I know the Raiders defense, if you don't have Max Crosby in there, looks pretty beatable. Not that the Browns did all that much last week, but I just don't trust Williams. I think multiple backs are going to play. Now, it hurts that Bidet got hurt because I thought he had a chance to maybe steal some work, and maybe Audric Estime, if anybody's going to be a right answer on this offense down the road in the backfield, it might be him. But as far as I'm concerned, the Broncos are Cortland Sutton if you need him, and I would ignore everybody else. I know Williams showed a little bit of kick last week, but his overall resume, his overall body of work is not something I trust.
Yeah, I'm kind of in this agreement place, Pat. I'm curious why you've got him in the top 24 because also like Bo Nix is just like the worst quarterback that we're seeing out there that's not named Will Levis. And, you know, there's going to just be no extra coverage needed so they can stack boxes if they want. The Raiders are just kind of tough in general. And Javonte has a 25% success rate so far if we're tracking the first 4 games. So I'm just kind of out. You are sharing some optimism, but also to point out, like, your optimism is with most rankers right now in the kind of the consensus rank. So what's got you positive on Javonte Williams?
So the Broncos do have a pop gun offense, and that's a concern for sure. But Javonte did lead the Denver backfield in snaps and touches last week by a pretty wide margin. He had 19 touches. Tyler Beatty had that scary medical episode, back injury. He's going to miss some time. So that's one less threat to Javonte's workload. It's still basically just Javonte and Jaleel McLaughlin. And it's basically 2/3, 1/3 as far as their usage. The matchup versus the Raiders, not that scary. And the Broncos are home favorites. We can expect a favorable game script, I think, for Denver. And we know how much Sean Payton likes to use his running backs in the passing game. So not that I'm abundantly confident in Javonte Williams, but I do think there's enough here for people to start him as an RB2 or a flex.
Braelon Allen, we talked a little bit about earlier when, referencing Breece Hall, but now that we're getting into the ranks, Braelon is putting himself in that exact middle spot of flex. So we look at like RB3s as more flex in this, and he ends up with the ECR of 30. Fitz, you've got him at 32. Scott, you've got him at 29. So you guys are just, sandwiched between, they're sandwiching the ECR here. Pat, let's start with you on Braelon Allen. Like the usage, the full workload is just not there, but he's just been so efficient when he's getting out there. What level, and especially on this matchup against Minnesota, where do you think the ceiling is for Braelon this week, knowing Breece is still out there and the Minnesota matchup?
Yeah, I think the ceiling is still just bare level flex worthiness, because he's only had one game with double digit carries this season. So I don't know how much we can trust him. But Scott did raise an interesting point earlier on. I mean, never something we would have imagined contemplating a month ago, but is Breece Hall for sure the best running back the Jets have right now? I mean, the way things have looked so far, it's kind of an open question. Braelon Allen is just like a much better, based on where he was drafted and how people were regarding him, like in dynasty rookie drafts. He has clearly outkicked expectations so far, and Hall hasn't lived up to his. So, I still think Breece Hall is going to get right and be fine. Maybe not the league winner people thought he was going to be, but I mean, Braelon Allen is maybe setting himself up for steadier usage, and I'm just not quite ready to trust the usage yet.
Scott, I obviously want to ask you the same thing, but I want to put it against something here. Trey Sermon comes in at 31. I think this is like the question mark of, Jonathan Taylor's status and everything like that. If there's no Taylor and it's Sermon's the number one guy, are Sermon and Braelon Allen even in a similar territory? I mean, Sermon's not like a great running back, but it would be, relative workload. Do you think they're going to be in the same territory still?
Probably, but they're such different players. Obviously, it's like, do you want 18 mediocre Trey Sermon touches, or do you want 9 to 11 Braelon Allen touches that are going to get your toes tapping? They're going to put some pep in your step. And I just want to reiterate what I said earlier. I think this is like an unsettled closer situation, that the next running back who looks good at the goal line, the Jets are going to say, you know what, let's ride with him. And if you're a Breece Hall manager, you better pray that your nightmare scenario is like, okay, pass interference at the goal line. Let's try Breece Hall. He's stuffed. Oh, let's try Braelon Allen. He gets in. Agent Zero is going to be your goal line back going forward. The Jets are ready to do something like that. I don't have a ton of faith in this coaching staff. I'm not really a Saleh fan. I think Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers is the kind of the co-offensive coordinators. I think Aaron Rodgers needs somebody to talk him out of a bad idea. I don't know that Nathaniel Hackett is that guy. I think the Jets have a lot of bad ideas right now, but I would be worried if I was a Breece Hall manager. And if I had Braelon Allen, you better overwhelm me in a trade offer, because there's so much upside here.
One of the guys I brought up earlier in the week on the buy sell trade show actually pops up here. Tank Bigsby, someone I am looking to try to buy low on. That was kind of my focus on those trade shows, was picking a wide receiver and a running back that I think you can buy before more breakout starts to happen. And you guys are both actually above ECR. He's ECR 35. Fitz, you've got him at 34, but Scott, you've got him at 31. And, I cited, he's got this really interesting combination of explosive plays while also, and this is something I picked on J.K. Dobbins earlier in the year, where it was like, after week one, it was like he was untouched. And maybe that's something we should look at on what the real explosiveness is. Tank not only is putting up explosive plays, I think it was like top 10 in the league in explosive yard percentage, but he's also getting a ton of yards after contact too. And he's looking really good as Etienne is trailing a bit down. Scott, do you think that Bigsby is going to start taking a bigger carry share moving forward? They haven't pulled the trigger. They haven't quite pulled the trigger here, but Bigsby really is looking efficient when he's out there. I think he's averaging like 5 or 6 yards a carry. He's just looked really good. And there's got to be a point where this struggling team starts to make a change. And you wonder if Bigsby would be the guy.
Totally fair question. Yeah, he was named Cartavius Bigsby at birth. They goes by Tank. Last year, he was in a mobile tank, or a tank that had no gas, because he looked like one of the worst running backs in the league. And he is so dramatically improved this year, a little bit better shape, a little bit understanding of how to run at the NFL level. I talked about losing being a motivation for teams to make changes. The Jaguars are 0-4. They're going to start their London swing next week in week 6 and week 7. I don't know how many people are going to come back on that plane. Maybe Doug Peterson doesn't come back. So what do you do if you're like a Doug Peterson, right? You need to save your job. You need to try different things. And right now, a thing that's working in Jacksonville is Tank Bigsby. A thing that is not working is Travis Etienne. I could easily see this being close to a timeshare 50-50 for the next few weeks, maybe a hot hand situation. I won't be surprised if at some point they have to play their best players. Doug Peterson can't play the long game. He's going to play the right now game. And his best offensive player, not named Brian Thomas right now, is Tank Bigsby.
And Fitz, you've got Bigsby one spot above Braelon Allen, who we just talked about here. So what do you want to add on Tank?
Yeah, not much. Scott covered it pretty well. I don't know if Tank is necessarily going to pass Etienne, because I don't think Etienne has been bad. Like, I thought he looked pretty good last week, but maybe it does turn out to be more of a 50-50. I'd maybe be a little higher on Tank this week and closer to where Scott is, except for I don't know if the Colts are a great matchup for running backs or not. I mean, the results have been really strange so far. The first 2 weeks, they allowed over 150 rushing yards to both Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs. The last 2 weeks, week 3, they held the Bears' DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson to 21 carries for 50 yards. Last week, Najee Harris, 13 carries for 19 yards. It just really weird oscillating results from that run defense so far. So I'm not sure how great a matchup it is. Otherwise, I'd maybe be a little higher on Tank if I thought it was good enough that a running back 2 might be able to pick up 40, 50 yards minimum against this defense.
Let's kick this or finish this off here in the whole RB conversation with a price check on the Bucs running backs. That had a big focus last week with Rachaad White and Bucky Irving. Let's see. ECR, Bucky Irving is 26 this week, with Rachaad White at 24. So they're still just together. Scott, you've got Irving at 27, Rachaad White at 32. And Fitz, I know you were a little bit hesitant last week to make that big move. You haven't made it, but you put them next to each other, 26 and 27, in favor of White for you, but in favor of Bucky for Scott. So Fitz, you look like you've closed the gap, but after seeing this last week of both of these guys, what closed that gap, and what is it going to take this week for Bucky to jump Rachaad White?
Maybe more snaps and more touches, and we saw pretty close to an even split last week. White 45 snaps, Irving 32. Both had 10 carries though. And what kind of confuses me is that I would maybe find this an easier call to make if we saw a distinction in how the Bucs were parceling out the high value touches, namely goal line carries and receptions and targets. But right now, it seems like that's kind of a split too. When the Bucs got inside the 10-yard line against the Eagles last week, it was mostly Bucky Irving. I don't know if White had any snaps from inside the Eagles 10 last week. But when the Bucs were in obvious passing downs, it seemed like it was White more often than it was Irving. So if White is just relegated to doing what he does well, maybe a little bit of early down work, but mostly passing down work, he could still have value as a pass catcher because he's good at that. And he's a good pass blocker too. They have no reason to take him off the field in obvious passing situations. But I do feel like Irving is showing that he is the better runner. And if he's getting the goal line work, I mean, that's obviously pretty valuable too. So right now I'm still being the fence sitter. I'm going to break late on this. Maybe the people who are already committing to Irving are the ones in the right here, and I'm just slow to it. But for now, I just still don't see a lot of separation in value.
And Scott, the pass down thing sounds very much like Austin Eckler, and that's what you worried Rachaad White becomes, is like an Eckler in that offense. I don't know if Bucky Irving is ready to become Bijan Robinson or anything like that, but getting the goal line carries was huge. So any other takes you want to throw on there, Scott?
Yeah, I love the prudent way that Pat outlined that situation and how he's being patient with White, which makes me think that maybe I've been a little bit too hesitant to be early to Bucky Irving. How did Bucky Irving not go to Wisconsin, by the way? I always want to say that he did, but he obviously didn't. It's important to note that White isn't just a capable receiver and pass blocker. He's excellent at those things. His catch rate is always really high. And even if Irving, and right now Irving's yards per carry are blowing White out of the water, but White's always going to have a role on this team. And also just remember 11 touchdowns for the Buccaneers. 10 of them have been Baker Mayfield touchdowns, 8 of them through the air. Baker has run in a couple of touchdowns. Nobody wants to see Baker Mayfield taking those touchdowns off the table when we need running back points out there in the street. But I think Pat actually outlined what I'm going to adopt going forward is that I think Bucky Irving is probably the better runner, but both of these guys are going to have roles, and it's just going to be another backfield where they both have some fantasy juice. Maybe they're flexes, maybe they're lower end running back twos, but it's going to be hard for somebody to really be a big winner because the other player is good enough to stay on the field too.
Lots of big running back questions this week with a lot of lower end guys that have boosted up. FantasyPros.com/rankings if you guys want to check out the RB rankings throughout the week. And make sure you check out the My Playbook tool. You can download it today at your app store or check it out, FantasyPros.com/MyPlaybook, for all the tough decisions. Let us help and hold your hand, give you great suggestions, and we'll take a look when you sync your leagues. We'll take a look at your roster and tell you which RBs you should be looking at. You can also set it, by the way, on ECR. You can set it to a cheat sheet of a couple of your favorite analysts. You could say, I want only Scott and Pat. Boom. You can set that up with the My Playbook tool. Do that today. And want to remind you, as one last thing, you want some more in-person stuff? Well, don't forget, we've got a weekly start and sit live stream on our YouTube channel where you can come and ask specific start and sit questions. We will be with you every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. For those listening on the podcast, just go to youtube.com/fantasypros, subscribe and click the bell so you're notified of all of those weekly streams.